I cannot marry her. Daniel's voice reached every corner of St. Matthew's Cathedral, clear enough to silence 200 guests and break something inside me that had taken 27 years to build. For 12 seconds before he said it, I had watched him stare past my shoulder toward the front pew. Not at me, not at the priest, at his father. Richard Whitmore sat with one hand resting over a black envelope, his expression calm beneath the golden light pouring through the stained glass windows. Daniel looked back at me only after the words were already hanging between us. I had imagined this moment differently for 11 months. His hands holding mine, his smile unsteady with happiness, my mother crying quietly in the first row while my younger sister, Sophie, tried not to ruin her makeup. Instead, Daniel released my fingers as though touching me had become a mistake. The organ music had stopped. Somewhere behind me, a woman whispered my name. Daniel, I said, but my voice barely survived the distance between us. What are you talking about? His jaw tightened. He wore the same navy suit we had chosen together in Newberry Street, the same silver cuff links I had given him on Christmas morning. Everything about him looked familiar except his eyes. Your family concealed its financial situation, he said. You allowed me to believe this marriage was based on honesty. A murmur moved through the cathedral like wind beneath a closed door. I felt every face turn toward me. My family's finances? I repeated. You know about the company. You know we sold the house. I never hid any of that. Daniel glanced at his father again. That small movement told me more than his accusation did. He had rehearsed this. Maybe they both had. Richard lifted the black envelope onto his lap, but did not open it. My mother had gone pale. Sophie rose halfway from her seat before our mother caught her wrist. There are debts you failed to disclose, Daniel continued. Legal obligations connected to the Carter estate. I will not allow you to use this marriage to transfer them to my family. The humiliation came slowly, not like a wave, but like cold water rising around my ankles. Guests shifted in their pews. Phones appeared despite the cathedral's rules. A photographer near the aisle lowered his camera, then raised it again when he thought I was not looking. I do not know what you mean, I said. Then explain the documents. Richard tapped the envelope once. Daniel stepped away from the altar. 1 foot, then another. Each inch felt public. Final. I am sorry, Emily, he said, but I cannot marry someone I no longer trust. I should have cried. I should have begged him to wait until we were alone. Instead, I looked at the man I had planned to spend my life with and understood that he was not afraid of losing me. He was afraid of disappointing his father. The priest cleared his throat, uncertain whether faith had prepared him for this kind of betrayal. My bouquet trembled in my hands. White roses. My father's favorite. He had been gone 10 years, and suddenly I was grateful he was not there to see strangers studying his daughter like a failed investment. Daniel reached for the black envelope. Before his fingers touched it, a low voice came from the last row. Then step aside. Nobody invited the man forward. Nobody asked who he was. Nobody needed to. Richard Whitmore stopped smiling. Daniel's face lost its color. And as Adrian Moretti rose from the shadows at the back of the cathedral, every person in the room seemed to remember how to be silent. Adrian Moretti walked down the center aisle without hurrying, and somehow that made every step feel more powerful. He wore a black suit with no tie, his expression calm beneath the cathedral lights. The photographer lowered his camera. 2 guests near the back moved aside before Adrian reached them. Even the priest stepped away from the microphone. I had seen Adrian only twice before, both times across crowded charity dinners where people lowered their voices when he entered. Daniel had called him dangerous. Richard had called him useful. Neither man had ever expected him to stand beside me. Adrian stopped a few feet from the altar and looked first at Daniel, then at the black envelope in Richard's hand. You chose an interesting moment to discover your principles, he said. Daniel straightened, trying to recover the confidence he had lost. This is a private family matter. You made it public when you accused her in front of 200 witnesses. Adrian's voice never rose. It did not need to. Richard stood. Moretti, this does not concern you. Adrian turned his head slightly. Richard stopped speaking. That was the first moment I understood what real authority looked like. It was not volume. It was the certainty that others would obey before they were asked. Adrian looked at me. His eyes were dark, steady, and impossible to read. Emily Carter, he said, as though confirming I was still present inside the spectacle everyone had created around me. Do you know what is in that envelope? No, my throat felt dry. Do you know why there are financial investigators waiting outside the east entrance? My fingers tightened around the roses. What? Sophie rose fully from the front pew. My mother caught her arm again, but this time Sophie pulled free. There are what? Daniel's face changed. Only slightly. Enough. Adrian noticed. So did I? He stepped closer to the altar, but did not touch me. The documents in that envelope place responsibility for several $1,000,000 in unauthorized debt under your name, he said. The transfer activates if this ceremony fails before the marriage license is completed. I stared at Daniel. You knew? Emily, it is complicated. You knew? I repeated. He looked toward his father instead of answering. Adrian's gaze turned cold. He knew enough to refuse you at the exact moment the agreement required. A wave of whispers spread through the pews. Richard held the envelope tighter. You have no right to interfere. Adrian faced him. You used a fraudulent signature, a dead man's estate, and a public ceremony to bury your liability under her name. Rights are no longer your strongest argument. My mother made a broken sound from the front row. I looked at her, but she would not meet my eyes. Something inside me shifted. The humiliation was still there, but anger had begun to burn through it. Why are you helping me? I asked Adrian. He held my gaze. Because if you walk outside alone, they will control the story before you. Understand the truth. Daniel gave a bitter laugh. And what do you call this, Moretti? Rescue. Adrian glanced at him. No. Then he turned back to me, his voice quiet enough that the room leaned toward us. Protection. Daniel stepped forward. She is not yours to protect. Adrian's expression did not change. You just made that clear. Then he looked across the cathedral, at the guests, the cameras, the families waiting to see whether I would collapse. If he refuses her, Adrian said, then she is under my protection. Daniel's mouth tightened. You cannot simply claim her. Adrian looked at me before he answered, but the words were meant for the entire room. Then she is mine. My face burned. Not from romance. From fury. He had defended me by speaking about me as though I were another contract. I stepped toward him. I belong to no one. Adrian did not argue. He reached into his coat and handed me a folded document. At the bottom was my signature, perfect in every detail. I had never written it. Then decide for yourself, he said. Stay here and let them name you responsible, or leave with me and learn who forged that. Behind us, Daniel whispered to his father, too softly for most of the room to hear. I heard him anyway. Moretti took the bait. The words reached me before the meaning did. Moretti took the bait. I turned toward Daniel so quickly that the cathedral lights blurred across my vision. What bait? I asked. Daniel froze. Richard Whitmore rose from the front pew, the black envelope still locked beneath his hand. Emily, you are upset, he said. This is not the time. You made it the time when you planned my humiliation in front of everyone I know. My voice trembled once, then steadied. Sophie stepped beside our mother, watching Daniel with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Adrian remained near me, silent now, allowing the question to belong to me. Daniel looked toward his father again. The gesture had become an answer all by itself. I did not mean for you to hear that, he said. That does not explain it. You should go with Moretti, Richard interrupted. If he believes he can solve this, let him try. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You are encouraging her to leave. Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You are the one who offered protection. The folded document felt heavy in my hand. My signature sat beneath paragraphs of legal language I did not understand, but one sentence had been marked in red. Upon failure to execute the marriage license, all outstanding Carter estate obligations transfer immediately to Emily Carter as sole surviving trustee. My mother is still alive, I said. Why does this call me the sole surviving trustee? My mother lowered her eyes. The room tilted beneath my heels. Mom. She opened her mouth, but Richard spoke first. Your family history is more complicated than you were told. Adrian moved half a step forward. Do not answer for her family. You seem comfortable answering for Emily, Daniel said. The accusation landed between us. I turned to Adrian. He is right about one thing. Adrian met my gaze. Which thing? You do not speak for me again. A murmur passed through the guests. Daniel almost smiled, as though he believed I had rejected the only person standing between me and whatever waited outside. Adrian did not look offended. He did not argue. Agreed, he said. One word. Immediate. Public. The response unsettled me more than resistance would have. I will leave this cathedral, I continued. But not because you claimed me. I am leaving because I choose to learn who forged my name. Adrian inclined his head. Then I will walk beside you. I handed my bouquet to Sophie. She took it with both hands. Come with us, I told her. I am not leaving Mom here. Our mother finally looked at me. Tears shone in her eyes, but fear held them in place. Go, Emily, she whispered. Please. That single word told me she knew more than she had admitted. Adrian offered no hand. He simply turned toward the aisle and waited until I moved first. Cameras lifted as we passed. I kept my shoulders straight, although every step in my wedding dress felt like walking through the remains of someone else's life. Outside, gray clouds pressed low over Boston. Two dark vehicles waited at the curb, but Adrian opened the rear door and stepped back. Where are we going? I asked. A private residence in Back Bay. My attorney is waiting there with the original files. I looked at him. Am I free to leave once I see them? At any time. And if I decide I do not trust you, then I give you the documents and arrange independent counsel. I studied his face, searching for the trap Daniel believed he had taken. Why would you do that? Adrian glanced toward the cathedral doors, where Richard and Daniel watched us from beneath the stone archway. Because they expect me to control you, he said. I would rather disappoint them. I entered the vehicle. Adrian sat across from me, leaving the space beside me empty. As we pulled away, Daniel called Richard from the cathedral steps. Richard answered without looking at his phone. Then Adrian's own phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. He read it once and turned the screen toward me. The message contained only 7 words. Bring the bride, and the contract disappears. The message remained on Adrian's screen as the vehicle moved through the wet streets of Boston. Bring the bride, and the contract disappears. I read it twice, then looked at him. They are not even pretending this is about money anymore. Adrian locked the phone and placed it face down on his knee. It was never only about money. Rain slid across the windows in silver lines. My wedding dress filled too much of the back seat. White fabric gathered around me like evidence from a life that had ended less than 20 minutes earlier. Then what do they want? I asked. Something your father left behind. The answer came too quickly. I felt anger rise again. You knew that before today. Adrian did not deny it. I suspected it. That is becoming a convenient word. He held my gaze. Suspicion without proof would have placed you in danger sooner. And silence protected me? He looked toward the window. No, the honesty stopped me. It did not excuse him, but it kept the conversation real. The vehicle turned onto a quiet street in Back Bay and entered an underground garage beneath a brownstone building. Adrian stepped out first, then waited while I gathered the heavy skirt and followed. He did not offer his hand until I reached the final step. Even then, he held it open rather than taking mine. I ignored it and walked past him. Upstairs, the residence was quiet, modern, and almost empty. No photographs. No personal objects. Only dark wood, pale stone, and windows overlooking rows of brick townhouses. A man in a gray suit stood beside a dining table covered with folders. Emily Carter, he said. Noah Bennett. I represent Mr. Moretti. Then I will need someone who represents me. Noah nodded. Already arranged. An independent attorney is available by secure call whenever you are ready. Adrian had listened. That unsettled me more than if he had tried to control the room. Noah opened the first folder. The Whitmore family created 2 possible outcomes for today. If the marriage license had been completed, Daniel would have gained management authority over the Carter family trust. If the ceremony failed, the debt attached to that trust would transfer to you as the listed trustee. So either way, they won. That was the design. He showed me a series of transfers, signatures, and notarized pages. My name appeared again and again. Perfectly copied. How much debt? I asked. $8.4 million. My breath caught. Adrian remained standing near the window, watching without interrupting. Noah turned another page. The unusual part is the authentication. A circular mark appeared beside the forged signature. It was a crest pressed into black wax, worn at the edges but unmistakable. A sailing ship beneath 3 stars. I had seen it on letters, birthday cards, and the silver ring my father wore every day of my childhood. That belonged to him, I whispered. Noah looked at Adrian before answering. The document was certified using Jonathan Carter's signet ring. The room disappeared around me. My father had vanished 10 years earlier after his boat was found drifting off Cape Ann. The Coast Guard searched for 6 days. No body was recovered. My mother told us the ocean had taken him. I had spent a decade learning how to grieve someone without a grave. That is impossible, I said. The ring went down with him. Adrian stepped closer, stopping on the other side of the table. Either someone recovered it, he said, or your father did not die where everyone believes he did. Noah slid one final document toward me. It was a hotel security record dated 3 months ago. A man had accessed a private safe deposit box under Jonathan Carter's original identification number. The signature at the bottom was shaky, but familiar. My knees weakened, and I gripped the edge of the table. My father is alive. Adrian's expression remained careful. We do not know that yet. But you knew about the box. Silence answered before he did. I looked at him across the scattered documents. How long? 2 weeks. The humiliation at the altar had hurt. This felt different. Colder. Deeper. You let me walk into that church knowing my dead father's name had appeared in Boston. Adrian did not look away. I was waiting for confirmation. You were waiting while everyone else made decisions with my life. I pulled the ring from my finger and placed it beside the forged contract. Daniel wanted my trust without earning it. My voice shook, but I kept going. Do not make the same mistake. Adrian looked at the abandoned wedding band, then back at me. What do you want to do? I straightened. Find the safe deposit box. Noah closed the folder. The hotel is less than 2 miles away. Adrian reached for his coat. Then we go now. I shook my head. No. I go. You follow only if I ask. For a long moment, the most feared man in the room said nothing. Then he stepped back from the table. Ask when you are ready. The hotel stood on Commonwealth Avenue behind brass doors and white stone columns, elegant enough to make secrets look respectable. I arrived in a borrowed black coat over my wedding dress, carrying my father's hotel record in one hand and the weight of 10 unanswered years in the other. Noah had arranged for an independent attorney named Rachel Collins to meet me in the lobby. Adrian remained outside in the vehicle because I had not asked him to come in. That mattered. The manager led Rachel and me through a private corridor to a records office beneath the lobby. The room smelled like paper, carpet cleaner, and old air. A steel cabinet filled one wall. The box was opened under Jonathan Carter's identification number, the manager said. The contents were transferred to long-term storage after the account became inactive. Who opened it 3 months ago? I asked. He hesitated. The security footage was damaged. Rachel looked at him. Conveniently, I can only tell you what the report says. He placed a narrow metal box on the table. My father's name was stamped beneath the handle. I stared at it until Rachel asked whether I wanted a moment. I have had 10 years, I said. The key was taped beneath the hotel record, hidden under a fold Noah had missed. It fit perfectly. Inside lay a silver signet ring, a sealed letter, a passport, and 3 memory cards stored in a small plastic case. The passport belonged to my father. It had expired 8 years earlier. There were no recent stamps. My hope rose and fell in the same breath. I opened the letter. Emily, if this reaches you, then the Whitmores have finally moved against the trust. Richard discovered that I had copied the records connecting his companies to accounts hidden through the Moretti network. I tried to expose him, but he threatened your mother and both of my daughters. Margaret signed what he demanded because I asked her to protect you. Do not blame her for surviving the choice I left behind. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to continue. Daniel was raised to finish what Richard began. The marriage was never about love. It was meant to place the Carter Trust under Whitmore control and make you responsible for every false debt they created. Adrian Moretti holds the access code to the final archive, although he may not know why. I trusted his father once. I pray the son understands the cost of silence better than we did. I lowered the page. Rachel said nothing. She knew there were moments when comfort became another interruption. At the bottom, my father had written one more line. I am alive only if the truth still has somewhere to hide. The sentence gave me hope, then took it away. It could have been literal. It could have meant nothing more than memory. I called Adrian. He answered immediately. Did you find it? You have the code to my father's archive. Silence. Yes, he said. How long have you known? Since his name appeared 2 weeks ago. And you still planned to send me out of Boston. I planned to keep you alive while I confirmed what the code opened. I closed my eyes. You do not save someone by turning yourself into another locked door. His voice softened. I know. No. You are beginning to know. I looked at the ring, the passport, and the memory cards. I am not leaving the city. I am finding the archive, and I am doing it with full access to every file you have. Agreed. My phone stays with me. My passport stays with me. No one follows Sophie without her consent. No one moves my mother without asking. Agreed. The ease of his answer surprised me. And Adrian? Yes. You will not call me yours again. The line remained quiet for 1 second. You are not mine, he said. Your choices are yours. If I stand beside you, it will be because you allow it. I looked through the glass wall toward the hotel entrance. His vehicle waited across the street, exactly where I had left it. Come inside, I said. When Adrian entered the records room, he did not take the letter from my hand. He waited until I offered it. Then he read my father's words and removed a small brass key from beneath his shirt. My father gave me this before he died, he said. He told me it belonged to a promise he failed to keep. He placed the key beside the memory cards. Engraved along its edge was the same sailing ship beneath 3 stars. Rachel turned one of the cards over. A hotel address was written on the back. Adrian recognized it before I did. That is where your parents celebrated their 20th anniversary, he said. I looked at him. How do you know that? His expression changed. Because my father was there. And according to this date, so was Richard Whitmore. The address led us to a hotel in Beacon Hill that looked unchanged by time. Red brick, brass lamps, a narrow lobby filled with polished wood and old portraits. My parents had celebrated their 20th anniversary there 1 year before my father disappeared. I remembered the photograph on our mantel. My mother in a blue dress, my father smiling beside her. Richard Whitmore standing at the edge of the frame with one hand raised toward someone outside it. Adrian's father, according to the date on the memory card, had been there too. The manager took us to a private records room beneath the ballroom. Rachel remained beside me. Adrian kept several feet of distance, close enough to help, far enough to prove he understood the boundary I had drawn. The brass key opened a narrow compartment inside an old filing cabinet. Inside was a recorder, a sealed packet, and a second letter from my father. My hands shook when I pressed the power button. Static filled the room. Then my father's voice returned after 10 years. Older than I remembered. Tired. Alive in a way memory had never allowed. He said Richard had built false debts through shell companies and planned to bury them inside the Carter Trust. He said my mother had signed temporary authority papers only because Richard threatened to destroy both families. He said Daniel had been chosen years ago to finish the transfer through marriage. Then another voice entered the recording. Richard, calm, certain. He told my father that love made people easy to control. A third man answered him. Adrian's father. He refused to help Richard and promised to protect the original records. The recording ended with my father saying one final sentence. The son will carry the last key, but only the daughter can choose whether the truth is opened. I turned toward Adrian. He looked at the brass key in his hand as though it had become heavier. You knew your father had something connected to mine? I said. I knew he left me the key, but not the recording. No, Rachel opened the sealed packet. Inside was a coded list of account numbers and a handwritten note explaining that Adrian's key unlocked the archive, but my signature was required to release it. That was why the Whitmores needed me married, disgraced, or financially trapped. They could not access the final records without controlling me. I looked at Adrian. You were not the bait. You were, he said quietly. The words hurt because they were true. Daniel had not rejected me to escape a bad marriage. He had done it to push me toward Adrian, force the key and the signature into the same room, and lead Richard to the archive. My wedding had been a map. Every humiliation had been placed like an arrow. You suspected this, I said. Adrian did not hide behind silence. I suspected they needed us together. I did not know why. And you still let me walk into that church. Yes. The answer was low, stripped of defense. Anger tightened my chest. You could have warned me. I could have. You could have told me Daniel was using me. Yes. Then why did you not? Adrian looked at the recorder, then at me. Because I believed watching the plan unfold would give me proof. The room became very still. You used my wedding. I did. You used my trust. I never had it. That does not make it better. No, he stepped back, not toward me. Away. I cannot undo what my silence cost you. I can only stop asking you to trust me before I earn it. The anger remained, but something inside it shifted. He was not asking forgiveness. He was naming the damage. Rachel found the archive access instructions inside the packet. The final files were stored in the hotel's private server, scheduled to delete at midnight unless released by both parties. It was already 6:40 in the evening. Then Sophie called. Her voice was breathless. Emily, the Whitmores turned the reception into a press conference. Daniel is telling everyone Mom planned the debt scheme. I looked down at my wedding dress beneath the black coat. For the first time all day, I knew exactly what I wanted. Tell them I am coming back. Adrian lifted his eyes. Do you want me with you? I closed the packet and faced him. You can come. He waited. But you stand at the back of the room, I said. You do not speak unless I call your name. Adrian nodded once. Then, that is where I will stand. The reception ballroom had been transformed into a courtroom without a judge. Reporters crowded near the dance floor. Guests stood in small circles beneath crystal chandeliers, whispering over untouched champagne. At the far end of the room, Daniel stood beside Richard beneath the floral arch that had been meant for our first dance. My mother sat alone near the head table, pale and motionless while a recording played through the speakers. Her voice filled the room. I signed the papers. I knew what they meant. The audio cut there. Clean. Convenient. Final. Richard lifted a hand toward the cameras. Margaret Carter created the debt structure and concealed it from both families, he said. My son ended the ceremony when he discovered the truth. The doors opened behind me. Every face turned. I removed the black coat and handed it to Rachel. Beneath it, I still wore the wedding dress. The same white silk. The same veil folded over one arm. But I no longer felt like the woman who had walked toward Daniel that morning. I entered the ballroom alone. Adrian followed several steps behind, then stopped at the last row of chairs exactly where I had told him to stand. Daniel saw him and lost the careful expression he had prepared for the cameras. Emily, he said, you should not be here. That sentence seems popular today. I walked to the center of the dance floor. The room quieted. Play the recording again. Richard smiled. There is no need to prolong this. Then it should not frighten you. Rachel connected the recorder from the hotel archives to the sound system. Before she pressed play, I looked at Daniel. Did you know I was innocent when you refused me? His eyes shifted toward his father. I knew there were serious questions. That was not what I asked. He lowered his voice. Emily, this is more complicated than you understand. You keep saying that whenever the truth becomes simple. A camera clicked near the bar. Daniel's face tightened. I knew you had not created the debt, he admitted. A murmur moved through the crowd. But my father said the marriage had to stop before the license was signed. Why? He said nothing. I stepped closer. Because rejecting me activated the transfer. Richard interrupted. Do not answer her. Daniel looked at him. Then at the reporters. Then at me. Yes, he whispered. The confession was quiet, but the microphones caught it. I felt the last piece of our future disappear, and this time it did not hurt. You let everyone believe I had deceived you. I was protecting my family. No, you were protecting your position in it. Rachel played the original recording. My mother's full voice filled the ballroom. I signed the papers because Richard Whitmore threatened my daughters. Jonathan told me to agree until he could secure the evidence. I knew the documents were false, but I believed compliance would keep Emily and Sophie safe. Richard's voice followed. Once Daniel marries the older daughter, the trust becomes ours. If the ceremony fails, the debt becomes hers. Either way, the Carter family carries the blame. The room changed. Not loudly. Faces turned away from Richard. Reporters moved closer. My mother covered her mouth with both hands. Daniel stared at the floor. Richard reached toward the sound system, but Rachel stepped between him and the recorder. The full file has already been delivered to federal investigators, she said. Daniel turned to me. Emily, I am sorry. I removed the wedding ring from my finger. You are sorry the truth arrived before you could escape it. I placed the ring in his palm and closed his fingers around it. You did not refuse me today. You revealed yourself. Behind me, Adrian remained silent. He did not move forward. He did not claim the moment. He simply stood where I had asked him to stand. Richard looked toward him with open fear. Moretti, call this off. Adrian did not answer. I turned toward the back of the room. Adrian. Only then did he step forward. Adrian crossed the ballroom only after I called his name, and the difference between that moment and the cathedral felt larger than the room itself. Earlier, he had stepped forward because he believed power gave him the right to decide. Now he stopped beside me and waited. Richard Whitmore watched him approach with the expression of a man who had finally realized the rules no longer belonged to him. "You have the archive key," Richard said. "You can still contain this." Adrian looked at me before answering. "That is not my decision." The reporters moved closer. Daniel stood behind his father, still holding the wedding ring I had returned to him. My mother rose from her chair and came to stand beside Sophie. She looked smaller than I remembered, but no longer silent. Richard's face tightened. "Do not pretend this is about principle. Your family benefited from the same accounts." Adrian reached into his coat and handed Rachel a sealed drive. "Every Moretti transaction connected to the Whitmore network is on this copy," he said, "including the records that expose my family's involvement." A murmur spread through the ballroom. Richard stared at him. "You would incriminate your own people? I would document the truth. You will lose control of half your organization." Adrian's expression remained calm. "Then it was never worth controlling." I looked at him, surprised not by the words, but by the cost behind them. He had chosen transparency before knowing whether I would ever forgive him. That mattered more than another promise. Rachel confirmed that the archive had been released through both access requirements, Adrian's key and my signature. The full file had already been delivered to federal investigators, an independent financial review board, and attorneys representing the Carter Trust. Richard turned toward Daniel. "Say something." Daniel looked exhausted. "What do you want me to say?" "That she knew. That Margaret planned it. That Moretti forced you." Daniel's eyes found mine. For one second, I saw the man I had once loved beneath the fear his father had built around him. Then he lowered his gaze. "None of that is true." Richard's control cracked in silence. Not with shouting, not with threats, with the simple realization that no one in the room was willing to repeat his version anymore. Two federal agents entered through the side doors with identification already visible. Rachel had arranged their presence before we arrived. They approached Richard and explained that he was required to accompany them for questioning. Daniel was asked to remain available and surrender all related financial records. No one touched them unnecessarily. No one needed to. Evidence had done what intimidation never could. My mother reached for my hand. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I thought silence would keep you safe." "It kept us uninformed," I said. Her eyes filled with tears. "I know." I squeezed her hand. Forgiveness did not arrive all at once, but neither did I pull away. Richard was escorted from the ballroom beneath the same chandeliers he had planned to use as the backdrop for my disgrace. Daniel remained near the floral arch, alone now. "Emily," he said, "I did care about you." I believed him. That was what made the truth sad instead of simple. "Caring is not courage," I said. "You chose fear every time it asked you to betray me." He nodded because there was nothing left to defend. The reporters began asking questions, but Rachel stepped forward and announced that a formal statement would follow. Adrian stood quietly beside me. "What happens now?" he asked. Not what he would do. What I wanted. I looked around the ballroom at the abandoned flowers, the untouched cake, and the dance floor where my life was supposed to begin under someone else's name. "Now I go home with my family," I said. Adrian nodded. "My vehicle is available. I did not ask for it. Then I will not send it." He took one step back. I watched him do it. The man who had entered my life by claiming me before a room full of strangers was leaving the next choice entirely in my hands. "Adrian," I said. He stopped. "Walk us to the door." He came forward, not ahead of me and not behind me, beside me. And for the first time that day, I understood that protection could feel different when it waited to be invited. 6 months later, I stood beneath the same kind of crystal chandeliers without wearing white. The Carter Foundation occupied the first floor of a restored townhouse near Boston Common, with pale blue walls, wide windows, and offices designed to help women facing financial coercion inside marriages, engagements, and family trusts. The money came from assets returned to my family after the investigation, but the purpose came from everything I had almost lost. Sophie managed the outreach program while finishing graduate school. My mother volunteered twice a week and spoke openly now about the years she had spent mistaking silence for protection. Daniel had cooperated with investigators and resigned from every Whitmore company. Richard was awaiting trial. My father remained missing, but the final archive proved he had survived longer than anyone knew. A postcard arrived once from Maine with no return address and only 4 words in his handwriting. "I am still watching." I kept it locked in my desk beside his signet ring. The foundation opening drew attorneys, advocates, reporters, and families who understood how easily a signature could become a cage. I had just finished thanking the staff when I saw Adrian at the back of the room. He stood alone beside the final row of chairs, wearing a dark suit and no expression I could easily name. He had not announced himself. He had not sent flowers. He had not asked Rachel for updates about me. During the past 6 months, he had done exactly what he promised. He dismantled the accounts connected to the Whitmore network, opened his companies to independent review, and removed men who believed loyalty meant silence. He never used those changes as a reason for me to trust him. He simply made them. Our eyes met across the room. He gave a small nod, but did not move. The memory of the cathedral returned with strange clarity. Daniel stepping away. Adrian stepping forward. My own voice disappearing beneath men who thought decisions became theirs when spoken loudly enough. This time, no one spoke for me. I crossed the room. Conversations softened as I passed, but I no longer felt observed. I felt certain. Adrian waited until I stopped in front of him. You came, I said. You invited the public. That is not the same as inviting you. No, he looked toward the foundation sign above the entrance. You built something important. I changed something painful. There is a difference. The question made me smile because he remembered. There is always a difference. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said, the first time you stood in the last row, you told an entire room that I was yours. His eyes held mine. I was wrong. No defense. No clever answer. Just the truth. What would you say now? I asked. Adrian took a quiet breath. I would ask whether I may stand beside you. The words were simple, but I understood what they had cost him to learn. Power had once meant taking the first step before anyone could stop him. Now it meant remaining still until I chose the distance between us. I extended my hand, but I did not let him take it yet. Then ask me properly. Something softened in his face. Emily Carter, may I stand beside you? I looked around at the offices filled with women reclaiming their names, their money, and their futures. Then I looked back at the man who had once mistaken possession for protection and had spent 6 months proving he understood the difference. Yes, I said. Adrian took my hand carefully, as though consent was not a formality, but the foundation of everything that might come next. We walked toward the front of the room together. Not ahead, not behind, beside each other. He had entered my life believing power meant claiming what another man abandoned. I chose him only after he learned that love begins where ownership ends.